This is a story, or legend if you will, concerning the Johto region in days gone by. You see, it was all but confirmed that a Pokemon Legends Johto game was on the horizon. It felt like the reveal was imminent. But then, suddenly, Pokemon Legends ZA surprised us all with a curveball announcement that nobody could have expected. While being very exciting in its own right, an unfortunate side effect of Legends ZA's reveal is that it casts aside the possibility of a Legends Johto game happening, at least for the foreseeable future. But what if we actually got a Legends Johto game instead? What could it have looked like, and what could it look like if such a game gets revealed in the future? Well, why don't we take a dive into this old Johtonian tale and take a look at some possibilities. So, our story begins in the humble village of Ecruteak. I believe that if any place in Johto were to serve as a central location or hub area for a Legends Johto game, Ecruteak would far and away be the optimal choice. This is not only due to its iconic nature, but what the plot of this game would also focus around, at least in this concept, which is the various legends of the Johto region that Ecruteak lies at the heart of. There's of course the legend of the Burned Tower and the legendary beasts, as well as the legends of Lugia and Ho-Oh, just to name a couple, that have their roots in Ecruteak. And the ultimate purpose of this game, under my concept, would be to allow these legends to play out with the player as a part of them. You would play as either Asa or Yona, two average residents of Ecruteak City who, as you may be able to tell, are ancestors of Ethan and Chris, the two player characters from the original Johto titles. This game would take place right around the time of the burning of the Burned Tower, which was about 150 years before the events of Gold and Silver. This helps to line it up timeline-wise with Legends Arceus, which was set at about the same time, and it also appears to be when Legends ZA might be set as well, making this the perfect time frame for this game in my opinion, especially considering the events that this time frame would allow you to experience on top of that. And allowing us to experience a glimpse of what Legends Johto could be like is today's sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped is the GOAT when it comes to hygiene and grooming, and with Father's Day coming up, you can now pass that goatedness along to your old man too. Let's start with the Handyman. The Handyman is an electric razor meant to give you the cleanest shave possible, and the fastest one too. With its wide blade and ability to tackle up to 3 days of beard growth, it'll get your pops an effortlessly clean-shaven look in no time flat. It also features skin-safe technology to prevent nicks and cuts, and is even waterproof, which will probably blow your dad's mind. Next up is another great product for dad, the Weed Whacker Nose and Ear Hair Trimmer. Those particular spots only become more of a mess as you age, and the Weed Whacker can chop it all down with no trouble at all, so your dad can finally feel young again. And what's a better Father's Day gift than that? You can grab either of these fine products and own Father's Day this year with the link in the description below. And when you use code HoopsVGM at checkout, you'll also get 20% off and free shipping. Not to mention, it also supports the channel too, which I'm sure your dad would really enjoy. So check that out with the link in the description, and a big thank you to Manscaped for supporting the channel. So as either Asa or Yona, you would just be living an average, normal life in Ecruteak City, until one fateful day where a certain someone arrived into town. This certain someone would be Ken, and you may recognize him as the ancestor of Yucine. Ken has arrived in Ecruteak because he travels the world investigating the legends of each region, and has arrived in Johto after some recent stories and rumors piqued his curiosity. Ken would be the person in this game who would act as a Pokemon professor and give you your starter Pokemon, and this was chosen due to Yucine already being a character that studies Pokemon who also has a tie to Ecruteak City. He is also known to travel in his searches for Suicune, just as I mentioned that Ken does when investigating the legends of the Pokemon world, which would allow him to gather the selection of starter Pokemon that he will ultimately allow you to choose from. And this overall made him a great fit for this kind of role, in my opinion. His name is also quite meaningful as well, as it comes from the word Kensaku, which in Japanese, from what I'm able to tell, means search, and this reflects Ken's trait of searching the world for legends and myths, and is also similar to Yusin's name, which phonetically is pronounced Yusin, as in, have you seen Suicune, in reference to his searches for the legendary Pokemon. Finally, I also went with the name Ken because there is a character that was cut from the original Gold and Silver games named Ken. This character was intended to be the player character's older brother, but was scrapped. So I thought that naming a character Ken in a Legends game like this would be a sly nod to Gold and Silver's past, since the past is of course the focus of this game, and also other Legends games as well. It's at this moment, however, just after running into Ken at the beginning of the game, that tragedy would strike. Actually, a bolt of lightning would strike the Brass Tower, and begin the iconic and legendary fire that would cause its destruction. That's right, this fabled moment would occur right at the beginning of the game, and you, along with Ken and the rest of Ecruteak City, would witness this moment firsthand, complete with the sight of Lugia fleeing the tower, as well as Ho-Oh resurrecting the nameless Pokemon that would perish in this fire as Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, who would then bound off in different directions, with Ho-Oh then doing the same before the fire is ultimately put out. The reason why this event occurs at the beginning of this game is for multiple different reasons, which we'll get into, but with one of those reasons being that it is the event that will set this game's events into motion. Upon seeing this incredible event, which features basically all of Johto's legendary Pokemon at once, Ken would be in absolute awe, and would immediately request your help in tracking down each legendary Pokemon involved in these events and what ended up happening to them. You would of course agree, and in order to help you in your search, Ken would offer you one of 3 Pokemon to take with you. These Pokemon would be Treecko, Litten, and Quaxly. I've picked these 3 as the starters for this game as essentially the result of a process of elimination, taking into account the starters that were already used for Legends Arceus, those who will likely be used for Legends ZA, those who I have used in my other Legends concept videos, and who would be the most likely candidates in general from there. From this point forward, though, the ultimate goal and premise of this game would be to, as I said, search the Johto region for each of the 5 legendary Pokemon: Entei, Suicune, Raikou, Lugia, and Ho-Oh. You would begin by inquiring with the residents of Ecruteak City to see if they saw where these Pokemon went, and with the use of some old-fashioned detective work, you would track down each legendary Pokemon, who would act as the bosses of this game in the same way that the noble Pokemon acted as the bosses in Legends Arceus. As you set out to search for these legendaries, you would effectively find yourself in the role of a Pokemon trainer, both training your own Pokemon to make them stronger, and catching new ones you find along the way to add to your team. As you train and grow the strength of your starter in particular, they would eventually evolve into new Johtonian forms. These designs that I'm showing you now, I have previously created for other videos, but hopefully they provide a glimpse of what these starters could be like in this game. Sceptile becomes a grass poison type in this form, Incineroar is a fire rock type, and Quaquaval is a water ghost type. If you want to find out more about these designs in particular, you can check out their respective videos on my channel, but it's not just these 3 who would be getting new forms in this game. Throughout your adventure in early Johto, you would also come across Johtonian Phantom. Johtonian Phantump is a dark grass-type Pokemon who inhabit the forests and other wooded areas of this past Johto region. And truthfully, this design came about because I had the thought of creating a regional variant Phantump that was based on a quaking aspen tree, and as such was white and gold in color. That just sounded like an S-tier design to me, so I had to make it. And while it made the typing of this variant a little bit tricky, since it obviously still had to be a grass type, I think dark grass ultimately ended up working well. There's also another reason why I thought a Quaking Aspen Phantump would be a lot of fun though, and that is because Quaking Aspens are unique in that they share the same root system with each other. So whenever you come across a cluster of them in the forest, they are all connected underground and are all essentially one single living thing. This unique trait brought to my mind another thing from Gold and Silver's early production, and that was this cut Pokemon. It was known as twins, and similarly also had a trait of being conjoined together like Quaking Aspens also do. It was also a dark-type Pokemon as well, just like Johtonian Phantump, so I thought it would be cool to recycle this cut design into a brand new Pokemon for this Legends Johto game, that could act as a new evolution for the Quaking Aspen-based Johtonian Phantump. So with all of that said, upon evolving Johtonian Phantump, it would become Trembleaf. Trembleaf is also a dark grass type that I imagine could evolve from Phantump when leveled up while having another Johtonian Phantump in your party, which would reflect the conjoined nature of this Pokemon. In addition to these two, another Johtonian form you could come across in this game would be Johtonian Dragapult. This variant of Dragapult is a dragon flying type, and acts as a piece of connective tissue in the history of this Pokemon. Thanks to one of Dreepy's Pokedex entries, we know that these Pokemon used to live in prehistoric seas before they presumably went extinct and were reborn as ghost types. So, due to this game taking place in the past, but not quite as far back in the past as the time when Dreepy lived in the sea, Johtonian Dragapult is the result of this Pokemon attempting to survive, and is ultimately the in-between point between the prehistoric Dreepy and the modern Dreepy that we know from the modern games. Its Pokedex entry would read, "An extremely rare Pokemon on the verge of extinction. Once living in prehistoric seas, it has miraculously adapted to living in the skies in an attempt to survive." The flying type comes from the fact that Dragapult is also inspired by aircraft, so it's leaning a little more heavily on those origins this time around, which is also why it features a more aerodynamic design. Along with Dragapult, though, is another Johtonian form that you'll also run into during your adventure, and that is Johtonian Rockruff. Now, I made this guy for another video a while ago, but I decided to bring him back here because I absolutely love his design. It's a pure ghost type, and it is based on the tale of Hachiko, the Japanese Akita, whose owner one day passed away unexpectedly, which resulted in the dog returning to the train station where the two would often meet every day for nearly 10 years awaiting his owner's return, until Hachiko himself passed away in 1935. So from the design to the origin, I just really love this concept, and I figured we could expand upon it by creating a new evolution for Rockruff that is more directly based on Hachiko himself. This would also make more sense conceptually in my opinion, since if Rockruff ever did get a regional variant, I believe that Game Freak would probably opt for giving it a new evolution instead of giving each of Lycanroc's 3 forms a variant of their own, which would kind of be required otherwise and would be a bit tricky and excessive in my opinion. So with that said, I have given Rockruff a new evolution based on this concept, and it is known as Spectruff. Spectruff is known as the loyal Pokemon, which further reflects this Pokemon's origin, and it is also a pure ghost type. On top of that, to even more strongly reflect the amazing story that is the inspiration for this Pokemon, I've also given it a signature ability as well, known as Everlasting Friendship. This ability would be kind of like a reverse of Mimikyu's Disguise ability, and would allow Spectruff to stay in battle even after its HP hit 0, until it was hit again with another damaging move, which would then result in it fainting, essentially giving it an extra hit after it should have normally fainted. Even if this is kinda busted, I think this would be a really cool and unique ability that could give this Pokemon a lot of spotlight, and not to mention would also portray its origins in a really cool way. As you discover all of these new Pokemon throughout your adventure, you will eventually track down the legendaries and report back to Ken on what you find. After finding the legendary beasts, you'll be given a choice on who you want to pursue next, Lugia or Ho-Oh. The one you pick, similar to Legends Arceus, is the one that you'll have the chance to catch, and after tracking it down, you'll find that they look a bit different compared to what you're used to, because if you choose Ho-Oh for instance, you will find yourself facing off against Sunrise form Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is able to obtain this form thanks to a new item it is holding, known as the Sunrise Wing. In this form, Ho-Oh also becomes a Fire Psychic type, and it will be no easy task to catch, but if you can pull it off, you'll then report back to Ken. After reporting back, Ken will tell you that he's figured out the location of the other legendary that you didn't choose, in this case, Lugia. Upon arriving at this location though, which would likely be the Whirl Islands, you'd find something other than Lugia instead. You'll actually see a character named Jet standing in the place where you were supposed to find Lugia. Jet, as you can probably tell, is Silver's ancestor, and just like his descendant, he would act as your rival throughout this game. To this point though, he will have only been a jerk and a thorn in your side, who has also been trying to seek out the legendaries for himself. But now he's actually been able to beat you to the punch and catch a legendary before you've even had the chance to find it. This would then result in a battle with Jet, where he would utilize his new legendary, which in this case would be Sunset form Lugia. Now, just like Sunrise form Ho-Oh, Lugia would obtain its Sunset form by holding an item known as the Sunset Wing. The Sunset and Sunrise wings would be a callback to the Rainbow and Silver wings that are used to obtain these legendaries in the original Johto games. Additionally, they are named as such, along with the Lugia and Ho-Oh forms, as a reference to one of the primary themes of the Johto games, which is time and the passage of it. The day and night cycle were first introduced in Generation 2, for instance, and there are a lot of other time-related things in Johto as well. So these sunrise and sunset forms act as a continuation of that theme, with Ho-Oh obviously being based on a sunrise and the day, and Lugia being based on the sunset and, more specifically, the nighttime. Taking a closer look at Lugia in particular though, its Sunset form is a Psychic Dark type, and in addition to its night-based theme, it's also meant to act as a successor of sorts to Shadow Lugia from Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, and sort of be a way of getting that Pokemon into the main series, which has been a request of the fans for years. This battle against your rival with either Sunset form Lugia or Sunrise form Ho-Oh would act as the big final battle of the main story, and upon winning, you will have completed the main story and will officially be able to begin the post-game. And just like Legends Arceus, there would be plenty to do in the post-game. For starters, you can now officially go out and catch the legendary beasts, which you were only able to battle as boss characters before in the main story. Then, you would also be able to battle one more time against Jet, and upon beating him again, he would relent and abandon his legendary Pokemon, saying that it has failed to make him any stronger, which would allow you to obtain the other box legendary that you didn't obtain during the main story, complete with its form-changing item. With that would cover just about every Johto Pokemon, with one exception: Celebi. After obtaining every legendary, and possibly even catching every other Pokemon in the Pokedex as well, depending on how you want the game to function, you would get the chance to catch Celebi at the Elix Forest Shrine via a special event. And after this special event, if you take Celebi back to the Elix Forest Shrine, Celebi would take you back in time, in a throwback to the event from Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This time, however, you would end up somewhere different on the other side. This time, you would find yourself in Ecruteak City, outside of the still-standing Brass Tower, revealing that Celebi has taken you back to before the tower burned down. From there, you would be able to walk into the tower, where, after all this time, you would finally see them. The nameless Pokemon who perished in the burning of the tower and who eventually became Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, acting as the big finale to this game and finally revealing these Pokemon to us after all these years. This would also be a perfect way, in my opinion, of revealing these Pokemon, because since it brings in time travel, not only would Celebi be able to play a key role in this part of the game and in the story, but it would also help to avoid any continuity issues, since with time travel, you can pretty much get away with whatever you want, especially in a less story-heavy series like Pokemon. Not to mention that a huge reveal like this would also make for a perfect end-of-game secret reveal / finale, kind of on the level of finding Red on Mount Silver, or the discovery of Volo and that whole plot twist in Legends Arceus. It would just be a great thing, especially in a game like this, and especially because it concerns something that the fans have been talking about for so long. And it's definitely the kind of thing that I would love to see happen in a Legends Johto game. And that is our story of the Johto region from the days of old, or at least what I would like to see out of a Legends Johto game. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, and let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe as well if you haven't already. A big shout out also goes to all of the artists that I've commissioned who drew all the designs and artwork for this video, including Oscar Belmonte, Alestava076, and Trevenart. You can check them all out within the credits in the description, and I definitely recommend you do. Finally, if you want to support the channel further and more videos just like this, be sure to give my Pokemon remixes a look wherever you get your music, and my Patreon with the link in the description for exclusive perks and benefits. I'll be back with another video as well very soon, and until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.